This chapter follows the period after the death of Moses, focusing on the leadership of Joshua, who takes command of the Israelites and leads them into the land of Canaan. The entry begins with the crossing of the Jordan River, marking a decisive step in claiming the land. The conquest starts with the capture of Jericho, a key fortified city, followed by encounters with other groups such as the Gibeonites, who secure their safety through negotiation rather than battle. In response to the advancing Israelites, several Canaanite cities unite in opposition, forming coalitions to resist the invasion, leading to a series of conflicts. As control is gradually established, the land is divided among the tribes of Israel, with each receiving its own territory. However, this division also leads to a degree of separation among the tribes, weakening their unity. The tribe of Levi is set apart, not receiving a typical territorial inheritance, but instead assigned religious duties. Central to their worship is the Ark of the Covenant, which is placed at Shiloh, making it an important religious center. The chapter also describes the condition of Canaan at the time, noting its favorable climate, fertile land, and signs of cultural and intellectual life, including an appreciation of nature expressed through early poetic thought. Despite the conquests, remnants of the original Canaanite populations remain in the land, continuing to influence its development. The narrative concludes with the death of Joshua, marking the end of the initial phase of settlement and conquest. After the crossing of the Jordan River and the entrance into the land of Canaan, the Israelites encountered no immediate resistance. A deep fear had already taken hold of the various tribes and populations inhabiting the land, rendering them unable to act. These groups were not united under any central authority that could organize a defense. Though accounts speak of 31 kings, along with others ruling along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, these rulers were not sovereign monarchs of large realms, but rather local chiefs. Each governed only a single town and its surrounding district, acting independently of the others. While the Israelites established their encampment near the place called Gilgal, situated between the Jordan River and the city of Jericho, the inhabitants of the land remained inactive. Jericho itself, being the first stronghold exposed to attack, could expect no support from neighboring towns and was left to rely entirely on its own defenses. In contrast, the Israelites possessed unity, discipline, and experience in warfare, guided by a capable and proven leader. This leader was Joshua, the son of Nun, belonging to the tribe of Ephraim. He had been chosen as the successor to Moses, who, by placing his hands upon him, symbolically passed on his authority and spirit. Joshua differed from his predecessor in character. He was not primarily a visionary or prophet, but a practical leader, focused on immediate needs and tangible results. His earlier actions, particularly in the conflict against the Amalekites near Rephidim, had demonstrated his courage and skill in command. His association with the tribe of Ephraim, one of the most prominent and influential among the Israelite tribes, strengthened his position. This tribe was known for its strong sense of pride and independence, and its willingness to follow Joshua ensured that the other tribes would also accept his leadership. The first objective of the campaign was the city of Jericho. This settlement lay within a highly fertile region, where palm trees and valuable balsam plants flourished. Its proximity to the Dead Sea contributed to a warm climate for most of the year, allowing agricultural produce to mature earlier than in other parts of the land. Because of its location and resources, Jericho held strategic importance. The city was strongly fortified, and its inhabitants, though hesitant to face an open confrontation, relied on their walls for protection. According to the narrative, these defenses failed in an unexpected manner, as the walls of Jericho collapsed following the united shout of the Israelite forces. The Israelites entered the city and, encountering little organized resistance, overcame its population, which was described as weakened by long-standing habits. Following the success, confidence among the Israelite warriors increased rapidly. Believing that further victories would be easily achieved, they directed their attention toward the smaller stronghold of Ai, located a few hours' journey to the north. Considering it of little importance, Joshua sent only a limited force against it. However, this decision resulted in failure. The defenders of Ai repelled the attack, and several Israelites were killed in the engagement. This unexpected defeat caused fear to spread among the Israelites. They began to believe that they had lost divine support, while at the same time the inhabitants of Canaan gained renewed courage. In response, Joshua reorganized his forces and adopted a strategic approach. By deploying the full strength of his army and using a calculated plan, he succeeded in capturing Ai. Nearby, the town of Bethel was also taken, not through direct assault, but by means of the stratagem. With these two fortified positions secured, the surrounding settlements became increasingly vulnerable. The inhabitants of neighboring towns and villages, rather than waiting for attack, abandoned their homes and fled toward the north, the west, and the south. As a result, large areas of the land were left largely unoccupied and were taken over by the advancing Israelites. Among the remaining populations, the people known as the Gibeonites, also identified as Hivites, inhabited a region called Gibon. Unlike others, they chose not to resist. Instead, they approached Joshua and offered submission. They proposed to share their territory with the Israelites on the condition that their lives would be spared. Joshua and the leaders of the Israelites agreed to this arrangement, confirming it with an oath, in accordance with the customs of that time. Through this agreement, the Israelites secured control over the mountainous region extending from the edge of the Great Plain to the vicinity of Jerusalem, which would later become the principal city of the land. The geographical division of the region contributed to the lack of cooperation among its inhabitants. The populations of the northern and southern areas remained separated and unwilling to assist one another. However, the southern groups began to recognize the growing threat. Fear of losing their lands overcame their internal rivalries and long-standing conflicts. As a result, they formed an alliance and prepared for collective action. 5 local rulers, those of Jebus, later known as Jerusalem, as well as the towns of Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, united their forces. Their immediate objective was not the Israelites themselves, but the Gibeonites, whom they regarded as traitors for submitting to the invaders and aiding their advance. Facing this threat, the Gibeonites called upon Joshua for protection. In response, he quickly mobilized his forces and marched against the allied armies. The confrontation took place near Gibon, where Joshua's forces achieved a decisive victory. The coalition of the 5 towns was defeated, and their armies were driven into retreat. As they fled across a wide distance toward the west and the south, their losses increased further, and their defeat became complete. This day of battle was remembered as a moment of extraordinary triumph, one whose memory endured through the passing of centuries. Even 500 years later, its events were preserved and celebrated in a song of war, a form of poetry used to recall victories and inspire future generations. In that song, the leader Joshua is described as calling upon the forces of nature themselves, speaking words that express the belief that divine power had intervened in the struggle. Joshua spoke, "O sun, remain still over Jabon, and you, O moon, remain over the valley of Ajalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon remained in place, until the people had overcome their enemies. This account reflects not only the memory of a battle, but the conviction that the success achieved was not due solely to human effort. The crossing of the Jordan River, which had already been regarded as a remarkable event, and the series of victories that followed, were seen as continuations of earlier wonders experienced by the people. These events became subjects of praise, not directed toward human strength, but toward the power of the deity, who was believed to guide and support them. The victory at the city of Gibon, a settlement located within the central region of Canaan, opened the way for further movement toward the south. This success allowed the Israelite tribes to advance into new areas. However, their progress was not complete. There remained fortified cities and strongholds in the southern region that they could neither capture nor fully control. These obstacles reminded them that their task was not yet finished. Having secured the central portion of the land, the united effort of the tribes began to weaken. The Israelites, who had previously acted as a single combined force, now started to separate into their individual tribal groups. This division was influenced in part by the example set by the descendants of Joseph, one of the sons of Jacob. These descendants were organized into 2 tribes, known as Ephraim and Manasseh. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh claimed a position of prominence among the Israelites. This claim had roots in earlier times, particularly during their stay in Egypt, and was strengthened by the fact that Joshua, the leader guiding the people in their conquests, belonged to the tribe of Ephraim. Because of this connection, the descendants of Joseph expected to receive favorable treatment. They directed their attention toward the central mountainous region of Canaan, an area known for its fertile soil and abundant water sources. This region included the city of Shechem, an ancient settlement originally associated with the Hivites. Shechem was located between two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, and benefited from a reliable supply of water. Because of these advantages, it became an important center within the land. The territory surrounding this area came to be called Mount Ephraim, reflecting the presence and influence of that tribe. Yet even this desirable land did not satisfy the ambitions of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. They argued that the territory assigned to them was insufficient for their growing population. They sought to expand their control further, aiming to possess the fertile plains extending to the north and the land surrounding Mount Tabor, another significant elevation within the region. Expecting Joshua to support their demands because of shared tribal ties, they approached him with their request. However, Joshua did not act as a partisan leader. Instead, he responded with a measure of firmness and even a degree of irony. He told them that if they were as numerous and strong as they claimed, they should be capable of conquering these additional lands themselves. He pointed them toward the regions inhabited by groups known as the Perizzites and the Rephaim, and suggested that they clear the force and establish control through their own efforts. This response disappointed the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Rather than continuing to participate fully in the collective campaigns of the Israelites, they withdrew from the joint military efforts. They chose instead to remain within the territory they had already secured. Their withdrawal had wider consequences. Other tribes, observing the separation, began to follow the same path. The unified campaign gave way to independent efforts, as each tribe sought to secure land for itself. The sense of collective purpose weakened, replaced by individual pursuits of settlement. 4 tribes turned their attention toward the northern regions. These were the tribes of Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali, each descending from one of the sons of Jacob. They moved into the plain of Jezreel, a broad and fertile area. Some of their people settled there, while others advanced further into the northern hill country, reaching areas near the base of a high mountain range. However, these tribes faced significant challenges. The inhabitants of the plains possessed advantages in warfare, particularly the use of chariots, which allowed for swift movement and effective combat on open ground. The tribes of Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali were less prepared to confront such forces. The tribe of Issachar chose a path of accommodation. They settled in the fertile plains, valuing the productivity of the land over independence. Rather than engaging in prolonged conflict, they accepted the authority of the existing Canaanite inhabitants and agreed to pay tribute, a form of payment acknowledging submission, in exchange for peaceful coexistence. The tribe of Zebulun, closely related to Issachar, took a more active approach. They established themselves securely in the northern region near Mount Tabor, demonstrating greater willingness to assert control over their territory. The remaining 2 tribes, Asher and Naphtali, encountered stronger resistance. The Canaanite populations in their area were more organized and determined to defend their lands. These groups united under the leadership of a king named Jabin, who ruled from the city of Hazor. Hazor was a significant center, exerting influence over surrounding districts. King Jabin called upon allied cities to join him in opposing the advancing Israelites. Faced with this united opposition, the tribes of Asher and Naphtali found themselves unable to prevail on their own. In response, they sought assistance from Joshua. At this stage, despite the growing divisions among the tribes, a sense of shared identity and mutual support still remained. Joshua responded to their call and gathered forces to aid them. With these reinforcements, along with the warriors of Asher and Naphtali, he launched a surprise attack against the coalition led by King Jabin. The battle took place near a body of water known as Lake Merom. The Israelite forces achieved a decisive victory, defeating the allied Canaanite armies and scattering those who survived. This victory was regarded as the second major success achieved by Joshua against a united enemy force. As a result of this battle, the tribes of Asher and Naphtali were able to establish themselves firmly in the northern region. Their territories lay between the upper course of the Jordan River to the east and the Mediterranean Sea to the west. Positioned at the far northern edge of the land, they served as frontier groups, with Asher occupying the western side and Naphtali the eastern side of the plateau. At the same time, other tribes moved to secure lands in the southern regions. 4 tribes undertook this task independently, without relying on the combined strength of the entire nation. Among them was the tribe of Benjamin, a smaller group closely connected to the descendants of Joseph. It is likely that they received assistance from Ephraim and Manasseh in establishing their territory. The land assigned to Benjamin was narrow and not particularly fertile. It lay near the southern boundary of the region and included the area inhabited by the Gibeonites, a group that had earlier formed an agreement with the Israelites. This territory was extended slightly by additional land to the east and west, forming the basis of their settlement as the division of the land continued. The people known as the Canaanites, who lived in the western plains stretching toward the Great Sea, possessed a significant advantage in warfare. They had chariots made of iron, strong and durable vehicles used in battle, which gave them a powerful edge over those who lacked such equipment. Because of this, the Israelites, newly arrived and not yet fully established, did not immediately dare to attack them after entering the land. Yet, despite this difficulty, the remaining tribes of Israel had no choice but to seek homes in that western region. Their journey and their purpose demanded settlement. Among these tribes, one stood out in strength and number. This was the tribe of Judah, a large and powerful group descended from Judah, one of the sons of Jacob, also called Israel. Alongside them were the descendants of Simon, another son of Jacob. The tribe of Simon did not stand independently, but placed itself under the authority of Judah, accepting a subordinate position, much like dependence under a ruling power. At the southern edge of the land, near the boundary of the desert, lived a people known as the Kenites. These were not strangers, but allies and relatives of the Israelites, connected to them through earlier associations during the long years of wandering in the wilderness. Since that time, the Kenites had settled in this region. The tribe of Judah relied on their assistance, believing that with their support, it would be easier to establish new settlements. In their movement into the land, the people of Judah chose their conflicts carefully. They avoided war with a group called the Jebusites, who occupied a region that included a settlement which would later become Jerusalem, a city of great importance in later history. It is likely that an agreement was made between them, allowing both groups to coexist without immediate conflict, leaving that territory untouched. The first major success of the tribe of Judah came with the capture of an ancient city called Hebron. In this battle, a leader named Caleb distinguished himself. Caleb was known for his courage and determination, and his actions secured the city. Hebron then became the central city of the tribe of Judah, serving as an important place of settlement and influence. Another city, known as Kirjath-Sepher, also called Debir, was taken by Othniel, who was the half-brother of Caleb. This continued the pattern of gradual conquest, led by individuals of strong character. Other leaders followed, taking control of additional towns and regions. In the early period of their settlement, the tribe of Judah did not always engage in conflict with the original inhabitants. Instead, there were times when they lived alongside them peacefully. The land they occupied was more suitable for grazing animals than for growing crops. Because of this, there was less competition between the newcomers and the existing population. The land was divided into smaller portions, allowing both groups to remain. The Canaanites and another group called the Amalekites continued to live in their homes, maintaining their presence in the region. The tribe of Simon, which had attached itself to Judah, did not receive a separate territory. It had no independent city to call its own. Instead, its members lived within the towns controlled by Judah. Although they shared the space, they did not take part in the decision-making processes of the tribe, remaining without a voice in its councils. Another tribe, known as Dan, faced even greater difficulties. The number of families within this tribe appears to have been small, limiting their strength. Unlike some other tribes, they did not receive substantial assistance from their fellow Israelites. The tribe of Ephraim, another major group, did not provide strong support. Instead, the Danites were allowed to occupy a small and uncertain portion of land in the southwest, partly within the territory associated with Ephraim, and partly near the land of the tribe of Benjamin. The responsibility then fell upon the tribe of Dan to secure a more stable home for themselves. They attempted to conquer the plain of Sharon, a fertile region extending toward the sea. However, they faced opposition from a people known as the Amorites, who prevented them from establishing control. Forced to withdraw, the Danites retreated into the mountainous areas. Even there, their situation did not improve. The tribes of Ephraim and Benjamin did not grant them permanent places to settle. As a result, the Danites were left without a stable home, compelled to live in temporary camps for an extended period. Eventually, a portion of this tribe made the decision to move far to the north, seeking a place where they could finally establish themselves. The overall progress of the Israelites in taking possession of the land of Canaan was rapid and striking. It left a strong impression on both those who lived at the time and those who remembered these events later. Not long before, less than 50 years earlier, the Israelites had been too afraid to enter the same land. Reports from scouts had described the inhabitants as too powerful to overcome, causing fear and hesitation. Now, the situation had reversed. The same inhabitants, once feared, became fearful themselves. Many abandoned their homes rather than face the advancing Israelites. Even when they attempted to defend their positions, they were defeated with relative ease. This dramatic change led the Israelites to form a strong belief that their success was not due to their own strength alone, but to the direct intervention of their God, who they believed had guided them and thrown their enemies into confusion. These events inspired expression in the form of poetry. The victories, seen as extraordinary, became the subject of songs that celebrated the achievements of the people and the perceived role of divine support. Although the distribution of land had not been equal, with some tribes receiving less favorable portions, most still possessed areas that could sustain them and serve as a starting point for further expansion. One group, however, stood apart in this regard. This was the tribe of Levi. The Levites were given no land at all. This was not an oversight, but a deliberate decision based on earlier instructions given by Moses. The purpose was to prevent this tribe, which had religious responsibilities, from becoming wealthy through agriculture. There was concern that, if they acquired land and wealth, they might neglect their sacred duties. This concern was based in part on the example of the priests of Egypt, who had accumulated wealth and power, forming an elite group that controlled resources under the appearance of religious authority. Instead, the Levites were expected to live modestly. They were to depend on contributions from the other tribes, receiving support from those who owned land and livestock. Their role was to focus entirely on religious service, maintaining the sanctuary and teaching the divine law. During the leadership of Joshua, who had succeeded Moses, a place called Gilgal served as the central point of religious life. Gilgal was located between the Jordan River and the city of Jericho. There, the Levites established their encampment, and the tabernacle of the covenant was set up. The tabernacle was a portable structure that represented the presence of God among the people. At this location, offerings and sacrifices were made according to their religious practices. However, Gilgal was not suitable as a permanent center. It was situated in an area that was not fertile and not easily accessible. As the situation of the Israelites became more stable, and after the tribes who had settled east of the Jordan returned to their lands, it became necessary to choose a more appropriate location. It was considered practical that the new center should be within the territory of the tribe of Ephraim, one of the leading tribes. Joshua himself belonged to this tribe and had his residence in a town called Timnath-Ser, which had been granted to him in recognition of his leadership. A place called Shiloh, also referred to as Salem, was selected as the new site for the sanctuary. When the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred object representing the agreement between God and the people, was brought to this location, an altar was built beside it. This became the focal point for gatherings and religious observance. At Shiloh, assemblies were held. These gatherings likely included not all the tribes at once, but certainly those located nearby, such as Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. The high priest at this time was Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron. He, along with other priests who followed him, made their home in Shiloh. Many of the Levites also lived there, while others were distributed among the towns of the different tribes. Despite this, their way of life remained unsettled to a degree. Without land of their own, they often moved from place to place, maintaining their role as servants of the religious life of the people. With the arrival and settlement of the Israelites, the land known as Canaan underwent a transformation that was not only political but deeply spiritual. The very identity of the land changed. It was no longer regarded simply as a territory among others. It received a new meaning and a new name, becoming known as a sacred inheritance, a land set apart, often described as the possession of the divine. It was seen as a place especially suited for people who were called to live according to higher laws and moral discipline. In contrast, all other lands came to be viewed differently. Regions beyond this territory, including what would later be called Palestine, were regarded as lacking the same sacred character. They were seen as unfit for sustaining the pure worship of one spiritual and invisible God, and unsuitable for maintaining strict obedience to divine law. The land itself was believed to respond to the behavior of those who lived within it. It was imagined as if it could accept or reject its inhabitants based on their conduct. There were certain actions considered so serious that the land was believed to reject them completely. These included murder, which is the taking of human life, licentiousness, meaning uncontrolled and immoral behavior, and idolatry, the worship of false gods or images. It was widely believed that the earlier inhabitants of the land had been driven out because of such actions, and that the same fate would befall the Israelites if they acted in a similar way. These beliefs became firmly established among the people. They came to regard their land, now often called the land of Israel, as superior to all others in its unique qualities. This sense of distinction was supported by the physical characteristics of the region itself, which were unlike those of any other land. Within a relatively small area, measuring approximately 150 miles in length and 60 miles in width, including the territory east of the Jordan River, a remarkable variety of natural features could be found. In the north, the high mountains of Mount Lebanon and Mount Hermon rose with peaks that remain covered in snow throughout the year. From these heights, the land stretched downward through hills and valleys, eventually reaching the dry and sandy desert in the south, where intense heat limited the growth of vegetation. In this compact region, conditions varied so greatly that different types of plant life existed close together, even though they would normally be separated by vast distances. The palm tree, which requires high temperatures, grew in one area, while the oak tree, which thrives in cooler climates, grew nearby. The climate itself seemed to influence human character, with the heat of the southern regions associated with strong and intense emotions, while the cooler winds from the northern mountains were linked with calm and thoughtful behavior. The land was bordered by water on two sides. To the west lay the Mediterranean Sea, whose coastline allowed ships to enter through natural openings. To the east flowed the Jordan River, which began at the slopes of Mount Hermon and ran almost directly from north to south. In its northern course, the Jordan River passed through a body of water known by several names, including the Lake of the Heart, the Lake of Gennesareth, and the Lake of Tiberias, more commonly called the Sea of Galilee. This lake contained fresh water, supporting many kinds of fish. Along its fertile shores, trees such as the vine, the palm, and the fig tree grew in abundance. The warm climate in this region allowed fruits to ripen earlier than in the higher mountain areas. Further south, the Jordan River ended in a very different body of water, known as the Salt Sea or the Sea of the Deep Basin, commonly called the Dead Sea. This lake presented a complete contrast to the Sea of Galilee. Its waters contained such high levels of salt, along with substances like magnesia and asphalt, that no animals with backbones could live in it. The surrounding air carried traces of salt, and the nearby land, marked by deposits of lime, formed a barren and desolate region. The shores of the Dead Sea rose deeply in many places, forming an oval-shaped basin with edges reaching heights of more than 1,300 feet above the water level. The land in this area was bare and unproductive, creating a stark and severe landscape. Yet even within this harsh region, there were small areas of fertility. Between the water and the surrounding heights lay oases where vegetation could flourish. In some of these places, the balsam plant grew, producing substances valued for their use. These fertile spots were considered equal in productivity to any land elsewhere. One such area was located near the western side of the region, where the soil was especially rich. Another important location lay at the southeastern edge of the Dead Sea, where, in earlier times, there had stood a town known as Zor, also called Tanara, meaning the city of palm trees. This region was known for supporting the growth of balsam plants. Not far from there, near the town of Beth-Haran, a valuable substance known as the balm of Gilead was found. However, alongside these fertile areas were stretches of salt marshes extending for miles, reinforcing the contrast between productivity and barrenness. Both the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee were associated with natural springs that produce warm water containing sulfur. These springs were believed to have healing properties and were used in the treatment of various illnesses. The land structure was largely mountainous, and this feature played an important role in shaping the life of its inhabitants. In the north, two great mountain ranges rose prominently, separated by a deep valley. These were Mount Lebanon and Mount Hermon, standing like two towering forms overlooking the land. Mount Lebanon reached heights of more than 10,000 feet, with its highest peak known as Dihor el-Kedid. Although this mountain range was not part of the territory controlled by the Israelites, remaining instead under the influence of neighboring peoples such as the Phoenicians and the Arameans. It was still of great importance. From its forests came cedar wood, a material highly valued for construction. Mount Hermon, with a height of more than 9,000 feet at its highest point, marked the northern boundary of the Israelite territory. Its snow-covered summit could be seen from great distances when not hidden by other hills, making it a notable feature of the landscape. From these main ranges extended smaller mountain chains within the land of Israel itself. Among these were the mountains of Naphtali, later known as the mountains of Galilee, with peaks reaching about 4,000 feet. These slopes descended gradually toward the broad and fertile plain of Jezreel Valley, which lay about 500 feet above sea level. This plain was not a single uninterrupted area. It was divided into smaller sections by additional mountain ridges. Among these features stood Mount Tabor, rising to 1,865 feet, notable for its rounded, dome-like shape. Nearby was Mount Moore, also called Ed-Dahi, which appeared to lean toward Mount Tabor. Further to the east extended the hills of Mount Gilboa, reaching heights of about 2,000 feet. To the west of the great central plain there rises a long and wooded mountain range known as Mount Carmel, stretching like a natural barrier close to the shore of the Mediterranean Sea. Before it lies the wide and important plain called Jezreel Valley. This plain forms an irregular triangle, extending approximately 20 miles from north to south, and varying between 6 and 15 miles in width from east to west. On one side it is bordered by Mount Carmel, and on the other by the heights of Mount Gilboa. This broad expanse divides the land into two unequal regions. The smaller northern portion would later come to be known as Galilee. To the south of the plain, the land rises gradually, reaching elevations of about 2,000 feet in the region called Mount Ephraim. Continuing further south from the city of Jerusalem toward Hebron, the terrain ascends even higher, attaining heights of around 3,000 feet, forming what was known as the land of Judah. Beyond this elevated region, the land slopes downward once more. At the ancient frontier settlement of Beersheba, the elevation decreases to about 700 feet. From this point begins the plateau referred to as Mount Paran, a region lying outside the core territory of the Israelites. Both the region of Mount Ephraim and that of Judah incline from east to west. Between these mountain slopes and the Mediterranean Sea stretches a long and widening strip of land known as the Plain of Sharon, also referred to as the Low Country or Shephelah. This plain extends from the northern reaches near Mount Carmel down toward the southern steppe. On the eastern side, the mountains descend sharply toward the valley of the Jordan River. Within this varied landscape, certain elevations held particular significance. Near the ancient city of Shechem stood two notable hills, Mount Gerizim, rising to about 2,650 feet, and Mount Ebal, reaching approximately 2,700 feet. Other important heights included Bethel in the east, standing at about 2,400 feet, Mizpeh, located several hours' journey from what would later become the capital, Mount Zion, rising to around 2,610 feet, and the nearby Mountain of Olives, reaching approximately 2,700 feet. The land, shaped by these varied elevations and plains, was divided from north to south into three distinct belts. The central region consisted of mountainous terrain. To the west lay the lowlands stretching toward the sea, while to the east extended meadowlands, known as Kikar or Araboth, descending toward the Jordan River. The climate varied across these regions. The lowlands experienced mild conditions, while the mountains were marked by harsher weather during the rainy season and more moderate conditions in the summer. In the valley of the Jordan, heat prevailed through most of the year. With the exception of the Jordan River itself, the land possessed no rivers that flowed continuously throughout the year. Even this river, because of its steep and rapid descent, could not serve as a route for navigation. The Jordan originates from three sources on the slopes of Mount Hermon. In its upper course, it moves slowly and divides into smaller streams before entering the body of water known as the Lake of Merom. After leaving this lake, its waters gather into a narrow channel of dark volcanic rock and continue into the Sea of Galilee. From there, the river broadens, flows rapidly over rocky ground, and forms numerous rapids before finally reaching and emptying into the Dead Sea, where its waters come to an end. During the season of spring, when melting snow from Mount Hermon increases its volume, the Jordan overflows its banks and enriches the nearby plains, particularly those lying to the east. Other watercourses, such as the Yarmuk River and the Jabbok River, do not flow throughout the year. These streams dry up during the heat of summer, Yet during the rainy season they contribute significantly to the fertility of the land. Agricultural activity often developed along their courses. Additional moisture was provided by small springs emerging from the hills, even where they did not form larger streams. In regions lacking natural springs, water for drinking was collected from rainfall and stored in cisterns cut into the rock. The greater part of the land was known for its productivity. This fertility arose from the quality of the soil, the drainage flowing down from the highlands of Lebanon and from Mount Hermon, as well as from the regular pattern of rainfall occurring twice each year. The region gained a reputation as a land flowing with abundance, a place capable of sustaining a wide variety of agricultural products. Grain such as wheat and barley grew alongside vineyards, fig trees, and pomegranate trees. Olive trees provided oil, and honey was also plentiful. The land offered sufficient resources that scarcity was not its defining feature where human effort was applied. Mineral resources were also present, as iron could be found among the stones and copper could be extracted from the hills. The plains, in particular, were highly productive, often yielding two harvests within a single year to those who cultivated them diligently. The northern areas beyond the plain of Jezreel were likewise fertile. In earlier times, the abundance of olive trees in these regions led to the saying that a farmer might place his foot in oil, a figurative expression of richness. The central region to the south of the Great Plain, belonging to the tribes associated with Ephraim and Manasseh, also proved highly rewarding. Springs flowed from the fissures in the rock, and as their waters combined, they became strong enough to operate mills and to irrigate the surrounding land. This region, associated with the descendants of Joseph, was described as being richly blessed, receiving benefits from both the heights above and the depths below, and yielding produce shaped by the cycles of sun and time. The land into which the Israelites had entered revealed a striking variety in its character, shaping both the lives and the thoughts of those who dwelt within it. Along the slopes of the hills, cultivation had taken firm root. Gardens flourished in ordered abundance, and vineyards spread across the land, heavy with clusters of grapes. The mountains rose above these cultivated regions, their heights covered with forests of trees such as the terebinth, a hardy tree valued for its shade and durability, the oak, known for its strength, and the yew, a tree often associated with longevity. These wooded heights played an important role in sustaining the land below, preserving moisture, and contributing to the richness of the valleys. In certain favorable areas, the palm tree thrived, producing fruit in remarkable quantity. The sweetness and richness of this fruit were so great that it was described as overflowing, an image used to convey the abundance of the land. Yet this fertility was not uniform across all regions. In the southern parts of the land, the conditions were less favorable. The terrain there was marked by chalky hills and a scarcity of valleys, limiting the extent of cultivation. Even so, these areas still provided pasture for flocks, allowing the pastoral life to continue. Further south lay a more difficult region, extending below the city of Hebron. This area was characterized by rocky ground and stretches of sand, creating a landscape that appeared harsh and unproductive. Winds coming from the desert passed over this region, carrying dryness that reduced the fertility of the soil. Because of these conditions, the area came to be known as the Neged, a term meaning the arid land. Despite its severity, there were scattered oases, places where water was present and life could be sustained. In these locations, with careful effort and attention, vegetation could grow abundantly. However, the land did not yield its produce easily. Only those who worked diligently could draw sustenance from it, while neglect resulted in barrenness. The climate of the land contributed to the health and strength of its inhabitants. Breezes from the Mediterranean Sea moved across the region, combined with currents of air descending from the mountains. These natural movements kept the air clear and reduced the presence of harmful conditions. Unlike other regions of the ancient world, there were no widespread marshlands producing unhealthy vapors. As a result, diseases and widespread outbreaks of illness were relatively rare, occurring mainly when brought in from other lands. In comparison with the large empires and territories known in the ancient world, this land was small in size. Yet its position and elevation offered remarkable views. From certain high points in the central region, one could look across the entire land, seeing both the eastern and western boundaries. The waters of the Mediterranean Sea could be observed to the west, while to the east lay the Dead Sea, along with the course of the Jordan River and the mountains of Gilead beyond. From the heights of Mount Hermon, a prominent mountain in the northern part of the region, the view extended even further. The landscape appeared varied and wide-ranging, combining mountains, plains, and bodies of water within a single panorama. The clarity of the air, which remained consistent through most of the year, created an effect in which distant objects seemed closer than they truly were. This quality of the atmosphere gave the impression that the entire land could be grasped at once. Such surroundings had a profound effect upon those who lived there. Individuals with reflective minds and a sensitivity to deeper meaning perceived in this land a sign of divine order. The mountains, such as Mount Tabor and Mount Hermon, were regarded as bearing witness to the greatness of the Creator. The alternating patterns of high elevations and fertile plains, combined with the presence of rivers and seas, created an environment that encouraged contemplation. Rather than overwhelming the mind, the heights and open spaces directed thought away from ordinary concerns and toward broader ideas. For those capable of reflection, the land itself inspired a sense of something greater than immediate experience. This influence found expression in the form of poetry, a type of writing that arose from deep awareness of the power and presence of the Creator. This form of poetry was distinct from that of other ancient civilizations. The Greeks and the Romans, though advanced in many areas of culture, did not develop this particular kind of expression, which was rooted in a direct awareness of the greatness of the single, universal God. In later times, other nations would come to learn and adopt such expressions, influenced by the traditions that originated among the Israelites. From elevated places, where the horizon extended widely, the mind could grasp the idea of vastness, of something without clear limit. This sense of the infinite, difficult to understand through reasoning alone, became more accessible through the experience of the landscape. Many who were sincere in their beliefs and focused in their purpose found in these surroundings a clear perception of the greatness and boundlessness of the divine. They came to recognize this power not only in the land itself, but in the natural processes that sustain life. They saw it in the movement of the sea, which appeared without limit, in the regular return of rainfall that nourished the soil, in the dew that descended from higher ground into the valleys, and in the daily operations of nature that were often hidden from those living in more confined environments. These reflections were expressed in words that acknowledged the Creator as the source of all these forces. He who forms the mountains and creates the winds, he who turns the morning into darkness, he who walks upon the heights of the earth. The Lord, the God of hosts, is his name. In time, this understanding expanded further. It was no longer limited to the natural world. A belief developed that the same divine power responsible for the order of nature also directed the course of human history. The rise and fall of nations, the changes in power and fortune, were seen as governed by the same authority that controlled the laws of the physical world. This idea became a distinctive feature of the thought of the Israelites, setting them apart from other peoples. Their experiences, both in the events of their history and in the environment in which they lived, sharpened their awareness of what was unusual and significant. They developed a heightened sensitivity to patterns and meanings, both in nature and in human affairs. On the eastern side of the Jordan River lay the land of Gilead, a region sharing many physical characteristics with the land to the west. This area had once belonged to the Amorites, a group of inhabitants, and was ruled by kings named Sihon and Og. After their defeat, the land came into the possession of the tribes of Reuben and Gad, two of the Israelite tribes. From the elevated areas of Gilead, wide stretches of land could also be seen. However, the view did not include the expansive side of the Mediterranean Sea, which appeared only as a distant line. Because of this, the region lacked some of the qualities that inspired the same depth of reflection and poetic expression found on the western side of the Jordan. The land of Gilead did not produce poets in the same way. It is remembered instead as the place of origin of a single prophet, a figure known for delivering messages believed to come from God. This individual was marked by a strong and forceful character, shaped in part by the rugged and less refined nature of the region. In this way, the Jordan River came to represent more than a physical boundary. It marked a division not only in geography, but also in thought and expression, separating regions that differed in their influence upon the minds and spirits of those who lived within them. At the time when the people of Israel carried out their conquests, the land known as Canaan was not empty or undeveloped. It was already marked by numerous cities and fortified places. These settlements, built and maintained by the original inhabitants, showed early forms of organized civic life. Within them existed the beginnings of structured communities, with systems of defense and shared customs. In contrast, the region called Gilead located to the east of the Jordan River, was far less developed. It contained only a small number of towns, and these were widely scattered, separated by considerable distances. Even after the Israelites had entered the land and secured important victories, the territories west of the Jordan River were not entirely under their control. Large and significant portions of land remained in the hands of the original Canaanite inhabitants. The reasons for this incomplete conquest are not fully clear. It cannot be determined with certainty whether this was due to a lack of effort or determination on the part of Joshua, the leader who had succeeded Moses. In his later years, Joshua no longer displayed the same strength and energy that had characterized his earlier leadership. Unlike Moses, whose determination remained firm until the end of his life, Joshua appears to have gradually lost the force required to continue aggressive campaigns. At the same time, the tribes that had already secured the most fertile and productive regions, especially the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, became less motivated to continue the struggle. Having obtained desirable land, they became satisfied and ceased to press forward. Their attitude influenced the other tribes, reducing the overall momentum of conquest. As the intensity of the earlier conflicts faded, each tribe began to focus on its own concerns. Instead of acting together as a united people, they became increasingly separate in their interests and actions. This lack of unity prevented them from completing the conquest. Without cooperation, they were unable to expand their territories further or to remove the remaining Canaanite populations from the land. Long before the arrival of the Israelites, the Canaanites had established places of worship throughout the region. These included altars used for sacrifices and locations regarded as sacred sites of pilgrimage. Around these places developed stories and beliefs designed to explain the world and to appeal to the understanding of the people who followed them. Many of these sacred locations were situated on elevated ground, such as mountains, which were often associated with divine presence. One such place was Mount Carmel, a prominent mountain that had long been considered holy. It was believed that priests serving the local deities delivered messages or oracles from this location. Another mountain, Mount Tabor, was also regarded as sacred. In addition, at the base of Mount Hermon, in a fertile valley, there existed a sanctuary dedicated to a deity known as Baal Gad, also called Baal Hermon. The name Baal referred to a category of local gods worshipped in various forms across the region. After the Israelites took control of parts of the land, these sites did not immediately disappear. At first, they were likely visited only by those who had joined the Israelites from other groups, individuals who were already familiar with such practices. However, over time, members of the Israelite population themselves began to follow this example. Those who lacked a clear understanding of their own religious teachings, or who still remembered the practices they had observed in Egypt, were especially susceptible. In areas far from central guidance, where the distinction between the worship of one God and the practices of surrounding peoples was not clearly maintained, many Israelites began to participate in the rituals of the Canaanites. They joined in sacrifices and ceremonies associated with idol worship. This blending of practices threatened to weaken the distinct identity that had been established for them. In the northern regions, beyond Mount Tabor, groups of Canaanite inhabitants continued to live. The tribe of Dan, already disadvantaged, found itself in a particularly difficult position. It was located among the Amorites, another group of original inhabitants. The territory held by the Danites was small and insecure, leaving them vulnerable. Meanwhile, the tribes of Judah and Simon, located in the southern part of the land, were physically separated from the other tribes. They lived among populations that followed different customs, including groups whose livelihoods involved both herding animals and engaging in acts of raiding or plundering. Between these southern tribes and their northern relatives stood the Jebusites, who controlled a central region. This separation created a barrier that prevented direct connection between the different parts of the Israelite people. This division remained in place until the later conquest of a city called Jebus, which would eventually be known as Jerusalem. Only after that event would a more direct link be established between the southern and northern tribes. As Joshua approached the end of his life, he may have looked upon the situation with mixed feelings. On one hand, the promises associated with the earlier patriarchs, the ancestors of the people, had begun to take shape. The Israelites now possessed significant portions of the land that had long been promised to them. On the other hand, the reality did not fully match the expectation. Like the experiences of individuals, The course of events in the life of a nation often fails to meet all hopes. Although the land of Canaan was now largely in Israelite hands, their hold on it was uncertain. The remaining Canaanite population still occupied strong positions, and there was always the possibility that they might unite and attempt to reclaim what had been lost. These concerns weighed upon Joshua in his final days. Another difficulty added to his unease. There was no clear successor who could command the loyalty of all the tribes. This was especially true for the tribe of Ephraim, one of the most influential groups, whose support would have been essential for maintaining unity. When Joshua died, the people experienced a sense of loss. Yet, this loss did not produce the same deep and unified mourning that had followed the death of Moses. The reaction was more subdued, suggesting that the full importance of the moment was not entirely understood by the people. Still, Joshua left behind an idea that would continue to influence them. He passed on the expectation that one day the entire land would belong to them fully and without division. This vision, held firmly in the minds of a people, carried with it the possibility of eventual realization. Yet, before such a goal could be achieved, the Israelites would face many challenges and hardships that still lay ahead.